Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I was 18 years old when I first decided to wear the scarf. My mother and my stepfather are both converts to Islam, but they decided to let my sister and I choose our own religious paths. Although secretly they hoped that we would pray 5 times a day, stop eating pork, wear hijabs, and marry nice Muslim boys, which I did. My parents are still holding out for my sister. Don't get me wrong, they give her plenty of space and don't hassle her about practicing Islam. But secretly, whenever my sister breaks up with the current boyfriend, my mom calls me to see if my husband has any cute Muslim friends. When I started wearing the scarf, I was an absolute mess. I would put the scarf on my head, walk out the door, and with a gust of wind, I was unraveled. So my solution was to start wearing pins, and a lot of them. I would put about 10 pins on top of my head like a halo, and then pin my shirt and my scarf together like a necklace, and I accomplished my mission. That thing wasn't going anywhere. But it also is how I gained my nickname, Pincushion. I was dangerous, and if you were going to hug me, you were destined to get hurt. Like my scarf, sloppy and unrefined, I soon found that the foundation of my previous identity was shaky. I was a stranger in my own skin, and I was a stranger in my own country. Privilege is never more apparent than when it is taken away from you. I learned that to be seen as an individual, who knew, it's a privilege. I learned that to be joined into a group and to be seen as with singular identities, with singular characteristics, is a privilege. And all of a sudden, I became the ambassador to Islam, the go-to gal for the Muslim perspective. And most of the questions were like very nice, out of curiosity, but some are hostile. Why do you wear the scarf? Why should women have to cover themselves? Why do women pray behind men? Why do people practice jihad? Are you a jihadist? Yes, I am. Because jihad doesn't mean holy war. Translated, jihad means to struggle. So yes, I am a jihadist. Jihad is the young man who tells his friends he doesn't drink and no, he doesn't want to sip. Jihad is the elderly woman pushing herself out of bed to make morning prayer. Allahu Akbar. Jihad is the young woman telling someone for the millionth time, no, I do not shower with my scarf on. And doesn't follow that with, are you a complete idiot? That's a real question, probably like once a month. My jihad is my scarf. Not so much the scarf itself, but the presence of the scarf. Its presence causes people to question my identity. Mostly, they want to explain me away as a foreigner. This sounds like, where are you from? Denver. This leaves my audience pretty unsatisfied, because they haven't been able to explain me away as an immigrant, so they usually follow this with, no, but I mean, like, where's your family from? Hoping at the very least I'm a child of an immigrant. I tell them my mother's from California and my father's from Hawaii. And if I really want to throw a wrench into their theory, I tell them about my grandmother who's Cherokee American. I love throwing in my heritage because I have just destroyed the world as they know it. Not only am I not an Arab, I am a white, Hawaiian, Native American Muslim. If I don't fit into the foreigner category, there's only one more explanation. If I'm not wearing this for culture, I must be an oppressed Muslim woman. This is a dangerous path for my audience to go down because, as it turns out, I'm a feminist. contradiction of me qualifying myself as a feminist and a Muslim was never more apparent than it was to Jennifer. Jennifer went by a different name, but for the sake of the story, she's Jennifer. Jennifer and I first met at Institute, the hellish 5 weeks of Institute, and we were to be co-teachers. And while we were making our introductions, Jennifer took it upon herself to inquire about my apparel. The questions started off, pretty normal. What is a scarf? What does it mean to you? But soon Jennifer's questions became more and more hostile. You see, Jennifer saw herself as a strong, independent woman, and if she had gotten to know me, she would have found that I do too. But Jennifer knew me. Jennifer knew that I was an oppressed woman, ruled by the men in her life. And her questions started to reflect this hypothesis. Don't you think, that's how Jennifer talks, don't you think that women shouldn't have to cover themselves? Men should be responsible for not sexualizing them, don't you think? What would your husband do if you decided to not wear the scarf? Soon, Jennifer's questions stopped being questions, and she started to lecture, trying to save me from my polyester prison. And the anger grew inside of me. But I held my aching tongue because to be an individual is a privilege. And I no longer represented myself, but I represented all Muslims. See, the problem wasn't that Jennifer asked me questions, but Jennifer didn't care to hear my answers. Jennifer knew me. A few days later, flash forward, Jennifer decides that she's going to teach our kids about the achievement gap. 2 days in. Yeah, that's what I thought. So you see, Jennifer had read all of the scholarly articles and textbooks about the achievement gap and about children in poverty, so she was here to save the world. I remember sitting in the back of the classroom as our children trickled in. The lesson started out okay. She showed our students the existence of the achievement gap with a few slides she had thrown together in the middle of the night. We all were. She showed them some data of the existence of the achievement gap so that they can reflect upon it. But then things took a turn for the worst. Jennifer decided to play a song by Jay-Z about black on black killing. And I started to shift in my seat. And the kids kind of bobbed along, not knowing what was coming. But anxiety shot up my spine because I felt something. It was going to happen. When the song was over, Jennifer tried to connect the achievement gap with gang violence. Not seeing the full impact of her lesson in her children's faces, she decided to tell them of their circumstance. The air went stale with anger. Some kids put their heads down, and some stared at her knowingly, because this wasn't the first time someone had tried to save them without knowing them. She went on, as she had done a few days before, trying to prove her point, making comments like, "You probably have to work a job to help your parents out." Or, "You probably don't have a car, so you'll have to ride the city bus." The funny thing is Jennifer didn't ask those kids one question. Not one. Jennifer knew those kids, but she did not listen. I urge you to listen. They can discover that their identity is their own, formed by the experiences that belong only to them. Thank you.